The US under cyber attack. Hackers allegedly linked to China expose millions of personal files. There are fears that bigger attacks are yet to come. So how will Barack Obama's administration respond? And how vulnerable is the US to hacking? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. It's been a difficult and some say embarrassing year for American counterintelligence. Security breaches have hit United States government agencies one after the other. And US investigators say the latest attack compromised background information on US intelligence and military personnel. Everything from financial history to past substance abuse. Some are now concerned that the leaked data could leave those employees and their families open to blackmail. John Terrett reports from Washington, D.C.
24 hours after the biggest federal employees union warned in a letter to the Obama administration that last year's hack of federal employees was far wider than had been let on, comes confirmation there may have been another even deeper breach. White House spokesman Josh Earnest saying evidence suggests there was a separate intrusion affecting a different part of the Office of Personnel Management Systems and Data.
At this point, I don't have additional details about the ongoing investigation into this particular matter.
A senior administration official tells Al Jazeera the newly revealed hack may have targeted the forms government workers fill out to qualify for security clearances. The information ranges from details about mental illness, drug and alcohol use to arrests and even bankruptcies. The apparent breach and the one revealed earlier could add up to 14 million federal records being compromised. On Thursday, the biggest federal employees trade union, the American Federation of Government Employees, wrote to the administration accusing the government of hiding behind the ongoing criminal investigation as a reason not to give out too many details. But Earnest was adamant protecting government systems is a big task given the size of the databases involved.
Protecting the computer networks of the federal government is a daunting challenge, and it does require the federal government to be nimble, something that's difficult when you're talking about an organization that's this large.
In Thursday's letter, union boss J. David Cox wrote, "We believe that the central personnel data file was the targeted database and that the hackers are now in possession of all personnel data for every federal employee, every federal retiree, and up to 1 million former federal employees." And he backed his accusations up with specifics, saying social security numbers, birth dates, pay history, and even data such as health insurance, life insurance, and pension information had been stolen. The row spread to Capitol Hill with terse exchanges between Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Harry Reid in the Senate over who is to blame for the hack, Reid saying openly for the first time it may have been the Chinese. John Terrett, Al Jazeera.
Well, China strongly denied the US accusations of hacking. Here's what the Foreign Ministry spokesperson had to say.
China is firmly against all forms of hacking attacks as a victim itself. China would like to build a peaceful, safe, open and cooperative cyberspace through international cooperation in this field. We hope the US side will be less suspicious, stop making groundless allegations, show more trust and participate in more cooperation.
Well, now let's get the thoughts of our guests. In Beijing, Zhao Zhudong, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. In New York City, Mike Lyons, Senior Fellow at the Truman National Security Project. And in London, Gavin Millard, Technical Director at Tenable Network Security. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with you, Mike Lyons. All this discussion about who is responsible or what is responsible. Once the malware has been identified, is it not possible to establish exactly its source?
Well, you can establish its source from a geographical perspective, but it's difficult to say that it was state-sponsored. There's going to have to be a lot more research for that in order to determine whether or not a nation state's to blame here. The government does believe that the geographical source was inside of China, and China does have responsibility for actions inside of its border. So I think we'll continue to focus, continue to look at what the source of the malware was, but for right now, from a geographic perspective, there's no question it came inside of China.
Well, Gavin Millard, some are claiming that the program was so sophisticated and so dense that it could only have been state-funded. What's your opinion of that view?
Well, I don't think the actual methods have been disclosed yet on how they broke into the infrastructure. I think if you actually look at some of the information that has come out, though, it sounds like a lot of the foundational security hasn't been followed by OPM. For example, rigorous patch management, two-factor authentication onto those systems, and also data encryption on the databases that stored the data.
Well, let's go to Zhao Shudong. We heard there from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, straight out denial of any involvement in the hacking. Has there been anything further from the government at this stage?
You know, the United States has been making similar accusations against China on cyber security, cyber thefts, and of course, the Chinese government and as well as the Chinese military have made public statements that they are not engaging in and have not engaged in any such kind of cyber attacks against targets in the United States and other countries. But it seems now that in the past few years, China has become a very easy target, a target of accusations by the United States. And the US is accusing China, the Chinese government, of being behind those attacks. And so, but the question is, China has been asking for evidence to show that is the case. But so far, I'm not aware of any occasion where the United States has been providing hard evidence to the Chinese side on this. So it's very hard to believe in their accusations.
Well, Mike Lyons, you mentioned the geographical aspect of it, that it was clear where it came from. However, there are difficulties, are there not, of whether groups are aligned to any government, whether the hackers are operating by themselves, or whether they have any kind of official alignment whatsoever. Once again, you're hearing there the call for evidence to be presented that there is a direct government link.
Oh, well, that's right. And I think that the United States has to be careful on how much it does expose on the techniques used to determine that, because that's classified in and above itself. Perhaps they could be discussed with the Chinese government behind a more secure place, but they're not going to necessarily come public with those specific techniques. That's just not good cybersecurity from this point going forward.
Well, Gavin Millard, you mentioned about the vulnerability of the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM. Now, what is staggering to some is that there was an attempt to breach the OPM's systems in March last year. So it's not as though this suddenly came out of the blue. It's already been tried once, and yet it happens again. That appears to be not just a failure in security, but also a failure in the personnel who are attempting to maintain it.
So I think that most infrastructures in the US are under some kind of attack continuously, be it script kiddie based in a foreign country, or even people within their own borders. So the attack that was attempted in March was, of course, a red flag and should have focused efforts. But unfortunately, it looks like those efforts weren't enough to reduce the risk of data exfiltration and loss. And actually, can I just comment on the geographic information as well? So it's actually really easy to manipulate geographic data when it comes to being able to attribute an attack. So quite often attackers will actually use the internet to be able to hide the error information either through a proxy or through an open gateway. So I think it's actually very difficult to pin down the location of these attackers just by an IP address. There has to be a lot more information gathered before we can actually say that it was within China's borders or not.
Now, Zhao Zhidong, in terms of the ongoing debate and the ongoing discussion, is there danger of a cyber war breaking out between the US and China? It's a kind of battlefield that no rules have been established whatsoever. But is there the concern that there would be some kind of a cyber conflict involving the two countries?
Actually, China and the United States have shared interests on cybersecurity. Actually, several years ago, the two countries decided to set up a dialogue on cybersecurity so that the two sides can compare notes on cybersecurity, and because China also would like to see international rules established on cybersecurity and information security. But because of the accusations made by the United States against 5 Chinese military officers, China suspended the dialogue. Actually, so far still China believes that the viable way to enhance cybersecurity is through dialogue between the two countries. Actually, the United States is the country that has the most advanced technology on cyber. It has both defensive and offensive capabilities in cyberspace, which no other countries actually have any capabilities to catch up and catch on with. And so actually China itself is a victim of cyber attacks. And because of the lack of strategic trust between the two countries, China, as I said earlier, has become an easy target of accusations from the United States. But China also has evidence that millions of cyber attacks against China originate from the United States. So actually for the two countries to avoid conflicts in this and avoid accusations against each other, avoid even conflicts between the two countries, dialogue is the only way. Actually, later this month, there will be a major dialogue between China and the United States. That is the strategic and economic dialogue. So the two countries can use this channel of dialogue to engage in discussions to avoid conflicts and to establish rules for cybersecurity.
Well, let me go on to Mike Lyons on that particular point. Clearly, what is emerging out of all of this as well is the need for some kind of rules to be established. As I said, the whole concept of cyber warfare is new. There are no established battlefield plans for it. Is this the way things need to go, to establish some kind of international-based rules in terms of preventing or agreeing not to conduct cyber attacks?
Oh, yeah, I mean, but this is just based on common sense. I mean, we shouldn't have other countries trying to hack into the personnel database of the United States government employee workers. I mean, that's clearly a form of espionage. That information was not used and put on the black market for phishing. It's not designed to hurt them financially. I mean, you've got corporate espionage that's going on in the cyber world as well. So we've got to start with a baseline, do no harm. And I think the United States government is not in the business of hacking into other governments' personnel databases looking to find information on employees. I mean, the information that was stolen now at this point is an epic fail from the perspective of the U.S. government. It's going to take decades likely to recover from. It's going to put many people at risk. And I'm afraid we just didn't do enough. It was a very big fail.
Well, in this particular case, the United States was the victim of a security hack. But the U.S. has also been accused of orchestrating these kind of breaches. Former U.S. security contractor Edward Snowden leaked documents in 2013 that alleged the U.S. spies on its allies. Snowden said the U.S. National Security Agency had more than 61,000 hacking operations worldwide, with some in Hong Kong and mainland China. The NSA leaks also led to accusations of the U.S. spying on European Union officers and monitoring the phones of 35 world leaders. Well, Gavin Millard, clearly everybody can hack if they want to hack, particularly if you're talking at state level with countries that have immense technological resources, such as the United States. Getting back to that issue, is there a need for some kind of level playing field to be established on an international basis to end or to prevent or to agree not to use cyber warfare?
I think that would be almost impossible to enforce, even if we could come up with rules of combat. You know, unfortunately, it's very easy for any nation state to go to a third party and use them instead. I think that if we could come up with some base rules, they'd simply be ignored and never agreed. So, yeah, I think the best thing we can really do to try and reduce the risk of each country being exposed is to really share more information on exactly how these attacks are orchestrated and what vulnerabilities or malware are used against each nation state. So if we shared more, then that would reduce the risk of overall warfare happening on the internet.
Well, Zhao Shudong, that's sort of going back to the point that you were making, that perhaps there is opportunity in this dispute at present. You mentioned, of course, there will be very high-level talks between China and the US later this month. Do you think that this type of discussion could actually help heal the relations between the two countries, to share this type of information or a level of the information in a bid to cut down on cyber hacking?
You know, as two major countries in the world, China and the United States have responsibilities for enhanced security in cyberspace for internationally. That's why China actually has been working with other countries, including Russia, to present a draft resolution on information security or cybersecurity to the United Nations. And China and the United States has been engaging in discussions on cybersecurity. As I said earlier, China itself is a victim of cyber attacks. And last year, you know, it was reviewed, as you said earlier, by the Snowden papers that China was a victim of cyber attacks by a National Security Agency of the United States. And the Chinese banks, universities, and military, and even Huawei, a telecom giant of China, has been targeted by the U.S. National Security Agency. So China is also vulnerable. Its critical facilities are vulnerable, as many other countries. So I think that this kind of dialogue may be constructive. It is better than nothing. It's better than accusations, you know, without evidence. And so accusation will lead nowhere. It will lead to more mistrust. And only this kind of dialogue may lead to cooperation.
Well, Mike Lyons, remembering as well that cyber attacks, it's nothing new, referring, of course, to the hack into Sony Pictures, allegedly carried out by North Korea. Mm-hmm. Here we have a situation where the question is asked, what kind of sanction can there be on a national level? How could the US respond and exercise some kind of sanction for that North Korean action, for example?
Well, I mean, the United States has got to almost fight fire with fire. I mean, first of all, let me go back to Edward Snowden. He is a traitor who's living abroad right now on the Russian government, knowing full well that if he came back to the United States, he would be prosecuted because he disclosed what was first legal in most cases, and second of all, it should surprise nobody that the United States has counterintelligence set up across the world. But to go back to the United States and what can be done, the question is whether or not we go on the offensive, and I think that's what this administration is perceiving to do and possibly opening that up. Because if that is the case, what do we do? Do we harm the North Korean citizen by shutting down their infrastructure or their grid? Does that open up a wider arms race that exists in the cyber world? Nobody wants that. So we've got to be very careful with this response. The Sony hack looks more of a malicious type, an irritant that really didn't get a lot of information other than to embarrass people. I'm afraid that's got not a lot to do with spying like this case does with OPM.
Well, Gavin Millard, I mean, clearly it is a delicate balancing act in terms of establishing whether there should be any form of sanction on a state level, and if so, then what should those sanctions be? What kind of retaliation should there be from the United States, for example? Should it establish and provide evidence as to the source of the hack?
Yeah, so I'm not a politician. I don't really want to suggest any sanctions. I think what's really interesting that we have to be really careful of is this whole idea of accurate attribution. So, you know, when the Sony breach happened, when the attack where they wiped thousands of systems and sent Sony back to the digital Stone Age occurred, the US were quite quick to blame North Korea for that attack on evidence gathered from the malware samples and some IP information. Now, was that actually accurate? Was it North Korea that perpetrated that attack? many of us in the infosec industry don't actually think it was North Korea. If you look at the malware samples, then also the tactics used, it was unusual for a North Korean state-based actor to do those actions. So whatever the sanctions are, we have to be very careful that those sanctions are placed on the right people, not the people that are immediately attributed to an attack when that attack occurs.
Mike Lyons, I see you nodding in agreement there. I mean, this is a very important point, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, no question. The United States just cannot, do a ready, fire, aim on this, especially given the full weight that it could apply to another country when it comes to this operation. So we've got to be we're a country of laws, and we want to make sure that if we're going to launch that kind of attack on someone or another country, that we're very specific and we've got the proof to show the world that that is the case.
Zhao Shudong, this is getting back to the point that you were making, that no evidence has been presented, and you have a situation where the U.S. has not directly accused China of being responsible, but you do have a minority leader in the U.S. Congress who actually came out and attributed the hack directly to China. Clearly, that was an intentional leak to put pressure onto China, do you believe?
The Chinese government will respond forcefully against any possible sanctions by the United States to be imposed on such kind of cyber attacks accusations. And China has repeatedly said that it's has not engaged in any such attacks. Certainly, any sanctions against China will produce a very negative impact on China-U.S. relations, and will ill-received by the Chinese the Chinese public, as kind of a way of isolating China, criticizing China as a kind of easy target, growing out of its strategic mistrust of China. And so, if the United States takes this kind of line of action, it will be counterproductive, and will be not conducive to a constructive relationship between China and the United States. Certainly, China does not want to see this, the issue of cybersecurity go along this line.
Okay, well, Mike Lyons, very quickly there, the fact that the minority leader in Congress comes out and actually accuses China, remembering as well that he sits on a very high-level Security and Defense Committee. Was this intentional, do you believe? Was it a way of pointing fingers without doing it officially?
Yeah, no question it was intentional to put pressure on the Chinese government, and I'm sure we're going to show them the proof that it came from inside those borders, from a geographic perspective. Now, he didn't go as far as to blame the Chinese government, I didn't think, but fundamentally, again, if these are emanating from inside those borders from a geographic perspective, they've got to start there. So I think that was the message he was sending to the Chinese government.
Gavin Millard, very quickly, on the issue of getting some kind of global type agreement, clearly it's a long way from it, and we are talking about a technology that is very difficult to establish on a global basis. So much of it is proprietary, so much of it is created by very selfish programmers, one might say. So it is difficult for these reasons, is it not, to establish some kind of a rule? Yeah,
so with regards to actually sharing data, there are already some standards out there. STIX is one that comes straight to mind. So I think it's less of a technology issue, more of a people and a process issue. How do we actually share this data? How do we make sure that the data that's shared from one nation state to another is good or bad as well? So I think it's a very, very difficult problem to solve, but then we're very good at solving problems nowadays with technology. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with some kind of agreement.
Well, at that point, my thanks to our guests, Zhao Shudong, Mike Lyons, and Gavin Millard. And thank you for watching. As always, we would like to hear your thoughts. You can contact us on our program page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, goodbye for now.